I am going to call this meeting to order. It is 7:03, and we're going to start tonight. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start with Courtney going over how this webinar feature works, and then we'll get started with a presentation.
Hello, everybody watching. I don't know if you've joined one of our webinars before, but I just want to give you a couple of basic information. For all of our attendees, thank you for joining us. You don't need to worry about trying to find your mute button or turning your camera off. In webinar format, you are automatically muted and your cameras are already off, so you don't need to worry about that function. There is no chat, so if you do have a question, you will see a Q&A button, and that is where you can type your question. When we have just natural breaks, I will read the question out loud and one of our panelists will answer them. And as soon as I read the question out loud, everybody will be able to see as well. Yeah, that is your most basic thing. Is if you have a question, feel free to type it out and we will get through all of them. Back to you, Polly.
Okay, so
hold on, Lynn.
The Q&A button is on the bottom, right? If you hover over the bottom.
Yes.
Perfect. So what we're going to do is Morgan's going to present the budget presentation. We're going to go through a couple of slides and then I'm going to pause and ask anybody if they have any questions on the warrant information. And then we're going to go through a couple more slides that are specifically budget related around expenses. And we're going to pause and ask some questions there. And then we will go on to the revenue and we will pause and ask questions. And then I'll give a brief, complete budget overview at the end. And then we'll ask, pause then and ask for questions as well. So there'll be a couple of different times where you can jump in. So if you can't think of a question right off, there'll be multiple times for you to kind of pop in and ask those questions. So why don't we first start with a roll and introduce the board members. I'm Polly Rico, the chair. Rick, why don't you go next?
I'm Rick Bartholomew, board member.
And then we have Kevin, why don't you go next? I don't hear Kevin. Okay, maybe Kevin's having some technical difficulty. We'll go to Mort. How about Mort?
I'm Mort Greenwood. I'm a board member.
Perfect. Okay, I think that is it. We might have another board member hop in, but we will introduce her if she shows. So Morgan, why don't you start with a presentation and we'll start off, unless somebody else has something else they'd like to say before we get going.
No, I can start, Courtney. I think I need screen sharing enabled.
I already did. Nope, I did not. I did the first time I started this meeting. Okay, you can now.
Okay, great.
Okay. Oh, Kevin, are you there?
I think I am.
Okay, yes, you are. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Kevin Blaney. I'm a board member from Richford.
Great, thanks. So what we're going to do is we are going to start going through the articles that you'll see on the warrant. Again, at the top of the slide, you'll see that the board seat and board seat and budget vote will be on Tuesday, March 2nd, our normal town meeting day. But unfortunately, we will not be gathering due to COVID restrictions. So you're going to be going to your polling place if you haven't requested a mail-in ballot. You'd be going to your polling locations to vote on these articles. So Article 1, 2, and 3 are typically voted on from the floor, but as I said, this year you're going to be voting on them from on the Australian ballot, which is a moderator, a clerk, and a treasurer. Then we go to Article 4, which are one school director, 3-year term. Let's see, 3-year term. And then we have a school director, another 3-year term, one from Enosburg and one from Richford. Okay, Article 4. Article 4, as you can see, shall the voters of the district approve the school board to expend $19,960,900,962, which is amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that the proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $15,171 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 3.37% higher than spending of the current year, which through the presentation tonight, we're going to be explaining that in detail. And then Article 6 is giving the board the authorization to put some surplus funds into a capital reserve fund. As we all know that it takes a certain amount of money to keep our buildings and our grounds and our campuses in good shape. And so we felt that this money would allow us to do some projects that we've been kicking the can on. So we'll go over that also later. Article 7. This is on the warrant every year, and that is to give the board the authority to borrow money, not in excess of anticipated revenue for the school year. And then Article 8 is, so this article is basically asking authority to spend $7,000 for a piece of property that's located next to the Richford High School. This came to us as an opportunity, and we felt that it was beneficial because it is creating more of this buffer between the residential and the school camp, areas, I guess. So we felt that it was advantageous for us to do that. So that is what that article speaks to. And there can be some questions in a little bit if you have any. And then Article 9. So this article it gives the board's authority to hold any audited fund balance as of June 30th, 2021 in a reserve fund to be expended under the control and direction of the board for the purpose of operating the school. If you remember I think last slide where this slide, in Article 7, where we ask permission to borrow money. And we do that because there are times when we're uncertain of the amount of tax revenue that is going to come in. And so if the tax revenue doesn't come in to the town or towns, the school has to go and then borrow that money. Well, Article 9 would actually give the board some flexibility that if we were able to hold some reserve funds, that it would decrease the need to go and actually borrow money if those tax revenues don't come in. So that's what Article 9 is. And again, if you have questions, we can ask those in a sec.
And you've got one question in the Q&A on the first page of articles.
Okay, do we have any more articles, or was that the end of it?
That's it.
Okay, perfect.
First, we do have another board member who jumped on, Polly.
Oh, okay, great. Amy, is it Amy?
Yes.
Sure is.
Okay, hi Amy, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Amy Irish, and I have a seat under the Enosburgh side of things.
Perfect. So at this point, we'll open up the questions for the articles. So Courtney, if you want to field those.
Yep. So we have one question so far. And the first question is, who is running for board seats in each town?
For the board seats?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So Morgan, do you want to speak to that? I'm not sure if any more have come in since our last chat.
Nope, since in terms of people whose name will appear on the ballot, Polly is running for re-election to the Enosburg board seat, and Sarah Hirschbees is running for the Richford seat. On both of those ballots, there is a space for a write-in, but those are the two candidates who had submitted petitions by the January due date.
Perfect. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Not yet.
Okay. Again, folks, if there's something comes up and you're looking at these articles as the meeting goes on, feel free to ask that question later. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through some slides that talk about the expenses in regards to this budget. And what we've done is we've broken them down per kind of grade band, I guess is how we're going to put it. So the first slide is in the pre-kindergarten, and this is regarding expenses incurred through that age bracket, so the pre-K. And you can see that the numbers are slightly down. This is often because of para educators that we sometimes move between different areas. And so if we've moved one out, sometimes those numbers go down. Morgan, did you have anything you wanted to elaborate on that?
No, I think you'll see those changes throughout. There is a lot of movement year to year for paraeducators between both regular ed and special ed, and then at the elementary schools between who's working in the pre-K classroom versus the kindergarten, first, second grade classroom.
Right. So as paras move around, sometimes depending on where your needs are, you can pull them out of one area and in another, and so you can see a decrease in this area. Okay, next slide. Okay, and so now this is our elementary. And so you can see, let's see, direct instruction is up slightly, and that is due to salary and healthcare increases. You'll see the after school program is a decrease right there, and that line, and you'll see that in following slides, that line, the after school program has been moved to the district expense. So you'll see that later on, but you'll see it's been taken out of each, again, kind of grade band or section and moved over to the district. So that's why there's a decrease there. Anything else, Morgan, that you want to speak to on this slide?
Cover.
Oh, the plant. So this is around insurances, a decrease in insurances. Anything else specific, Morgan, you want?
So what you'll see throughout the budget is we have moved a lot of the insurance from the school level, so elementary school, high school, as well as Cold Hollow, and put that in at the district level at the end of the budget. The insurance bills generally come into the supervisory union, and when we were 5 separate districts, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to part those out to the different districts. Now we're really only splitting it up the 2 ways between Enosburgh-Richford and then Northern Mountain Valley, and not trying to figure out a way to apportion it between the elementary, high school, and tech center.
Great. So now we're on to the secondary, so the high schools. Again, you can see the direct instruction is up, and that is a result of salary and health insurance costs. And again, there's that after school program where you can see there's a decrease. And again, there's that plant line where you see that there's a decrease. Now the debt service, you can see that's a pretty healthy decrease. And that is a one-time savings. It usually is parsed out over a period of time. But because we're getting towards the end of our bond, that they are basically giving us this one-time savings all in one lump sum. And Morgan, you can feel free to fill in any holes that I might have missed on that one.
Sure, this is it's tied specifically to the bond at Enosburg Falls High School. There are 2 more principal payments on it. The Vermont Bond Bank regularly goes out and refunds the bonds, and they will pass any savings on to their clients who are towns and school districts. In this case, there's not a lot of time left on that bond, as Polly said, and so we're going to see a one-time big decrease, basically a refunding of interest. And so this is something that we should all enjoy this year, because next year that's going to disappear again. But in 2024, so 2 years from now, that big bond is going to be retired, and so that principal payment will come off completely.
That's good news. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide, and this is Cold Hollow. And you can see there's really not a whole lot of movement here. Again, there's that decrease in the plant. Yeah. Anything I'm forgetting here? I mean, there's not a huge amount of movement on this budget.
No real programmatic changes there.
Yeah.
So plant is the one outlier, I guess.
Yeah. Does that bring us to the end of our expenses? No, district. We have the district left right here. District. Perfect. So this one is a little, it's a change. And so you can see in the direct instruction, there's a pretty significant number there. The majority of this number is due to some accounting practice changes that we have done. In the past, we did not designate money that we spent as tuition for kids who are attending Cold Hollow. Because we were taking in that money as well. So it was a wash. And so due to state accounting practices and recommendations, they said, well, you really should designate the money you're paying to Cold Hollow in tuition. But you can, of course, record that in your revenue that you're taking in. So you're going to see some pretty large numbers on both the expenses and the revenue side. And that is because we're trying to show that shift of funds. Also in this line is, again, healthcare costs, as well as increases in the increases in the salary, and as well as we talked about that after school program. Remember, we kept kind of kicking it down in the other budgets. Well, this is where that number will added the increase is in that line. And again, you can see the decrease in the debt service. And so what I want to bring your attention to is the very last line, that total general fund expenses. We're going to see that line in just a second, because this is the line that showed up on the mailer that was sent out to families and people. So you will see that line again in just a minute. So at this point, we're done talking about the expense side. We're going to talk about the revenue side in just a sec, but I wanted to open it up for any questions that you may have at this point.
We do have one question that's, I think, relates to one of the articles. But are there other potential uses for the space in Richford, or is it exclusively a buffer?
So I'm going to probably ask Beth, because she knows the property better than I do. But originally it was thought of that it would be, it would create kind of the distance between school campus and residential. But Beth, did you want to speak to potential uses for that piece of property?
Yes, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is potentially. However, we were approached about acquiring the property in like November, right in the middle of COVID. And so that's really taken up most of our time this year. No surprise to anyone. And so we haven't really thought of any use at this point in time. However, it's the property that's right below the sign, the Richford High School, Junior Senior High School sign. If you're coming up Corliss Heights, it's on the left. there was a small blue house there that was taken down, and it's literally right on the school line. And so when the select board approached us, they thought it made sense. And they're essentially just charging us for the costs to take down the building that was there and to make it site ready. So we potentially may be doing something there, but as Polly said, we haven't really had a discussion about that yet.
I'll just jump in again as people are thinking about any other questions on the budget. And I just want to walk through that Cold Hollow tuition change again, because it is such a significant change for your budget. And I think a good example is prior to the Act 46 merger, if a student from Richford was attending classes at Cold Hollow, the Richford Town District would make a tuition payment to the Enosburg Town District for that kid for tuition. And so there was a little bit of money going that way. Certainly with the towns in Northern Mountain Valley, there's a significant amount of money coming into Enosburg for Cold Hollow. The way the state wants us to record this, and I can explain how it works, but I can't make it make any sense. They want to see a tuition payment from the Enosburg-Richford Town School District for Enosburg-Richford kids to go to Cold Hollow. And so it's sort of like writing a check for yourself and putting it in your checkbook. The money's going from Enosburg-Richford, hitting the district-wide budget, and then it's going into revenue, hitting the revenue budget. And so it makes it look like a big increase for the year that we correct this in the budget, but in terms of the tax rate, it's a wash because you've got the same amount of money going in as coming out, and so you don't have to raise any more ed fund money for that.
Holly, we don't have any questions.
Okay, perfect. So let's go on to the next slide. We'll talk about revenue. And we love revenue. And so again, this local revenue, you can see again that it's a fairly large number, and it's because we're taking in that Cold Hollow tuition, as well as other tuition, right, that we receive from people coming into the district. And the state revenue, you can see, is down, and that is as a result of moving that number, part of that number back into the local revenue, which is that Cold Hollow money that Morgan was talking about. And so, oh, the other revenue, that was tuition, right?
That's the use of the remaining fund balance.
Oh, yes. Oh, we're right. Sorry. So yes, yeah, as you can see, the article that was on the warning asked for $500,000 to put in a capital reserve fund. Like I said, we've been kicking some cans down the road. We know that if once we have the money to kind of put the money where it's needed, but there was a surplus. So 500,000 will be going back into the budget as revenue to lower your tax rate.
And I can talk a little bit about the source of that surplus because having $1 million left over is pretty significant.
Exactly. The tuition.
It's primarily due to tuition from fiscal year 2019, so the 2018-2019 school year. And the way that high school tuition works in Vermont is that the board, as part of their budget process, will set an anticipated tuition rate. So this board has done this already for the 21-22 school year. The towns like Berkshire, Bakersfield, Sheldon, Montgomery that send kids to Richford High School and Enosburg High School, those districts pay the tuition rate based on the number of kids that are resident in their towns and showing up at these receiving high schools. there's a process at the end of the year by which the state looks at our books and says to Enosburgh-Richford, okay, you said you were going to charge $16,000 per year for tuition. We've calculated your actual tuition rate for that year to be $16,500. And then Enosburgh-Richford will go back and they will charge that $500 difference to any of those districts that sent them kids. If the tuition rate comes in lower, Enosburgh-Richford would cut a check to those districts to sort of true up for prior years. The state has been pretty far behind in those calculations. Normally we get a figure in time to include it in the next year budget, so you don't have a lot of big swings. In 2019, Enosburgh-Richford sent a pretty significant bill to all its sending districts, and it was for both high schools because they were separate at that time. So Richford High School underestimated what their tuition charge should be. Enosburgh High School underestimated what their tuition charge would be, and Cold Hollow did as well. And so Northern Mountain Valley got a pretty significant bill, but they were able to pay it in that same year. And that's really the source of probably 2/3 of that fund balance. The rest of it comes from additional special ed revenue that we didn't budget for, but we received based on where our expenses lie. And then there were a few more tuition kids that came in FY20 than we had anticipated. And that year still hasn't been trued up from the state. So there may be either some more money coming in from that, or Enosburgh-Richford may end up giving some money back to NMV.
Right. So as you can see, the school board has to make a lot of guesses on a lot of these numbers, and it definitely helps us if we, I guess well. So I think that takes us from revenue. Again, I'm going to ask the public if they have any questions regarding revenue, or if they have thought of any from the expense side as well.
So far we don't have any, but I'll give it a couple of seconds just to see if somebody's typing.
Looks like you're nailing it, Polly.
Oh, wow. Either that or people are falling asleep. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so this I'm going to actually go down line through line and try to be as concise as possible. So if you remember, I pointed you towards on the expense slide, I pointed you to that bottom number of expenditures, and that is the first line. And again, there's that change, which looks like a very, very big change. But again, we just nailed down that a lot of that was due to the Cold Hollow and tuition money kind of coming and going. So this would be the tuition spent in the expenditures, along with healthcare and salaries. Then the next line is our revenue, and we've talked about that, about the amount of money that we had coming in. And so what you do is you take the first line and you subtract the second line, and that gets you the third line, which is the equals education spending. And then when you have that line of what it costs to, run the place, and I should say, I should point out that the first line, the expenditures, is actually the line that the school board has the most control over. It's the one thing that we really can have some say in. You're going to see there are many lines where it's kind of out of our control as far as how many kids to walk through the door and what the state kind of pulls these different levers. So the first line is really what the school board controls. But anyway, we're down to the equals education spending. So you take that number and you divide it by your equalized pupils. So our number of kids. And as you can see, we're down to 13 kids, 13.11. So when you divide your education spending by the number of kids you have, that comes up with your per pupil of education spending. And so you can see that we're $15,177. That was on the warrant when we asked permission that we could expend the amount of money to pay in the budget for that number. And so Morgan, I'm going to put you to the next slide real quick. We're going to come back to this, but the next slide actually shows where we rate in the county and in the state as far as per pupil spending. This was last year's numbers, correct, Morgan? Last year's?
Correct.
And you can see Enosburgh-Richford is towards the bottom. And then there's at Northern Mountain Valley just above us. And you can see the county average, we are below that. And you can see as far as the state average, we are well below that. So we're still coming in towards the bottom, even though it does look like an increase. So I'm going to put us back to the other slide, please. And so I left you off on the per pupil spending, and then you divide that by the dollar yield. The dollar yield is set by the state, and this number moves. You know, we talk about estimating. We kind of have to estimate, but the state has come in, the legislature has come in and said that they're estimating that they're going to spend $11,385 per kid. So then this equals our residential school tax rate, which you can see is down a penny from last year's budget. So now, if that was the end of it, we would be really good, right? We're down a penny from last year. But then there's this other level that's also set by the lever set by the state, and that's the common level of appraisal, CLA. And so the rule of thumb is, if your common level of appraisal goes up, your tax rate goes down. If your common level of appraisal goes down, your tax rate goes up. And this is set by the state as far as what your property values come in at. So you can see in Enosburgh, the property, the CLA, the common level of appraisal, has gone down, which is going to increase the tax rate. So you can see once you apply that lever, you know, we were down a penny, now we're up 3. We're up 3 pennies, which I don't know if you heard in the media or the news, they were estimating a 9-cent increase statewide for all schools, at least. And so you can see that we have come in well below that. So that is actually great news. I feel that we have kind of dodged the bullet of COVID with the financial landscape. So then we have Richford. Well, this one's a little funny, because I just told you that if the common level of appraisal goes down, your tax rate goes up, right? Well, this one, it actually went down, but the tax rate didn't go up. And it's because it went down in such a small amount that it didn't even change it by a penny. So that's why Richford's still a decrease, even though their CLA decreased as well. So they're down from last year. So that's basically an overview of the numbers we just went through lead into this document, right? The expenditures we just explained, the revenue, and then all these levers that are put in by the state and how that all shakes out. Are there any questions that you have? That was a lot.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for that, I think I want to point out 2 things, just in terms of differences in the flyer that we mailed out as compared to what's in your town books. So again, as Polly said, this 19,990, 962 is the number that you are voting on town meeting day. That's really the only solid number here. The equalized pupil number is one that kind of moves throughout the spring. We think this is probably as close to final as we're going to see, but it is a little bit lower than the number that was projected when we printed your town books. And so the per pupil ed spending is a little bit different than what you saw in your town books. The dollar yield had a significant swing. So initially went with the tax commissioner's recommendation, which comes out on December 1st, and was really based on some pretty gloomy scenarios around state revenue coming in because of the pandemic. The number that we're using here, and this is on the flyer, is significantly higher. And this is the number that has been passed out of the House Ways and Means Committee. So it seems to be more concrete. This number won't get settled until one of the last bills that the legislature passes in a normal year. There was some talk about trying to speed this up this year, but that doesn't seem to have happened. But this is really an estimate that we won't have until we've already hired teachers for your next year and are really putting into those plans. But we think that this number is much closer to accurate compared to what we warned. And that's really the main piece driving this decrease in the anticipated rate for Enosburgh-Richford. And then again, Polly explained the common level of appraisal, and the way that I like to explain it to folks is this year, if you're in Enosburgh and the listers have your house assessed at $97,310, the state really thinks that your house is worth $100,000. And if you're in Richford and the assessors have it at $112,340, the state thinks that that property is assessed at $100,000. And so what the CLA is doing is taking this rate and trying to make it fair based on what they see is happening in the two separate districts in terms of their grand list.
Okay, we still do not have any questions, Polly.
Wow. Okay. Oh,
Well, it's a very nice comment.
okay.
Thank you all for everything you do. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much. So if there's no other questions, again, you can see that the board seat and budget vote will be Tuesday, March 2nd. I know the polling in Enosburgh will be at the Emergency Services Building from 10 o'clock in the morning to 7 at night. And voting in Richford will be at the town hall, correct?
Yes.
Town hall from 10 to 7 as well. And so please adhere to all safety precautions, bring a mask, keep your social distance. And again, you can request a mail-in ballot by Friday. So this Friday is the cutoff. So if you'd still like your mail-in ballot, you can still get one. Just give your town clerk a call and they will send that out to you. So thank you all for coming, and anything that we can do to answer any questions, please reach out if you can think of any, and we'll do our best to answer those for you. Okay, I think we're good. Does anybody else from the board have anything to say, or any principals feel like they need to chime in, or now's the time? Nope. Okay, well, thank you very much.